Every inch of Darth Vader's armor wasn't just protection, it was pain, power, and pure fear. 10th, helmet, respiratory system, and breathing apparatus. This part blew my mind. Vader's survival depended on the tech inside that helmet. After his duel with Obi-Wan on Mustafar, his lungs were scorched beyond repair. The heat burned his mouth, esophagus, and deep into both lungs. Without life support, he wouldn't have lasted minutes. The triangular mouthpiece wasn't just for show, it housed a breathing system that regulated oxygen and filtered out toxins, dust, and harmful gases, keeping every breath pure. That chilling mechanical sound, that was the system working 24/7. But it came at a price. The helmet had an airtight seal, meaning Vader couldn't remove it unless he was in a hyperbaric chamber. The neck brace dug into his skin to lock it in place, causing constant irritation. And his vision severely restricted. Peripheral view was gone, forcing him to rely on the Force to see in battle. And what would you do if every move you made felt like you were looking through a tunnel? 9. Helmet, auditory and visual sensors. And here's where it gets even stranger. The fire on Mustafar didn't just ruin Vader's lungs, it burned his ears so badly that he was left with severe hearing loss. So the helmet had to make up the difference. It came with auditory sensors that not only amplified sound, but could also be tuned to specific frequencies. That meant Vader could eavesdrop on communications or focus on noises most people couldn't even hear. Think built-in surveillance gear, but permanently strapped to your head. His eyes, they weren't destroyed in the fire, but the helmet still overhauled his vision. It added night vision for total darkness and infrared for spotting heat signatures, useful for hunting Jedi in pitch black or tracking enemies through walls. The catch, every single thing he saw and heard was filtered through machine processing before it reached his brain. Imagine never experiencing the world raw. No real sound, no unfiltered sight, just data, constantly mediated by technology. That's the reality Vader lived in every second. 8. Neural interface. But wait, it gets way more shocking. The helmet and suit weren't just advanced armor, they were wired directly into Vader's brain through a neural interface. That link meant he could mentally control his systems, adjusting oxygen flow, monitoring power levels, and even tweaking suit functions, all with a single thought. It sounds like high-tech convenience, right? Except there was a huge risk. If that neural link were ever damaged, Vader's ability to operate his life support could fail instantly. There were no backup, no secondary control method. His survival depended on that fragile connection staying intact. In a way, the suit wasn't just a tool he wore, it was an extension of his nervous system, and that made it both his greatest strength, and his biggest vulnerability. 7th, bodysuit armor composition. Just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. Vader's bodysuit was made from multi-layered durasteel and plastoid, tough enough to resist most blaster fire and even take the edge off a lightsaber strike. Sounds unstoppable. But the inside of that suit was a nightmare. The inner lining was packed with biomechanical sensors constantly feeding health and environmental data to his helmet. It even had healing agents built in. But here's the catch, they didn't heal him. They just kept his injuries from getting worse, locking him in a permanent state of damage. And then there was the daily agony. The armor constantly rubbed against his charred, hypersensitive skin, keeping old wounds raw. Tiny needles embedded inside delivered regular injections, not for comfort, but for survival. And this wasn't just armor, it was a mobile torture chamber, a prison he carried everywhere, every second of his life. 6. Gauntlets and gloves.
I do not fear the dark.
You know that scene where it looks like Vader catches blaster bolts with his bare hands? Yeah, there's a reason that works. His gloves were made from material thicker and denser than the rest of his suit, able to absorb direct blaster hits without damage. In battle, this created the illusion that Vader could physically stop laser fire, an image he absolutely never corrected. For stormtroopers and rebels alike, it wasn't just intimidating, it was horrifying. Fear was one of Vader's most powerful weapons, and every deflected bolt fed that legend. And remember, in Star Wars, perception is just as dangerous as reality. Vader didn't just fight with a lightsaber, he fought with the fear of what people thought he could do. 5. Cybernetic limbs. Now here's the part that will stick with you. Vader lost all 4 limbs, one arm to Count Dooku during the Clone Wars and the rest to Obi-Wan on Mustafar. His replacements weren't sleek or agile. They were heavy, cumbersome cybernetics built more for brute force than finesse. Sure, they gave Vader superhuman strength, but they also slowed him down. To compensate, his armor included an advanced electronic assistance system, boosting his movement so he could perform even basic motions with precision. But these limbs were never truly part of him. They were attached, not seamlessly integrated, which meant he lived with constant phantom limb pain, a cruel reminder of the flesh he'd lost, and because they had to be removed for regular Bacta tank treatments, his body never had the chance to fully adapt or accept them. Worse, they could malfunction at any time, sending jolts of pain through his nervous system mid-battle. Can you imagine fighting through that? 4th life support chest panel, and And here's the part that kept Vader alive every second of every day. That control box on Vader's chest, it wasn't just part of his intimidating look, it was the heart of the entire armor. This panel controlled nearly 90% of the suit's essential systems, from regulating oxygen intake to distributing power across all components. It even administered controlled doses of painkillers, just enough to dull the edge but never remove the constant ache. Without this unit, nothing else in the suit could function. But here's where it gets truly cruel. The panel was hardwired directly into Vader's nervous system. Any damage it took in combat wasn't just a mechanical problem, it became an immediate physical nightmare for him. If a blaster bolt or a lightsaber strike so much as grazed it, the pain would hit him like raw electricity surging through every nerve. This wasn't just discomfort, this was sharp, burning agony deliberately built into the system. And perhaps the most chilling part, there was no manual override. If the chest panel stopped working, Vader's breathing would stop with it. One precise, well-aimed strike could end him instantly, no matter how powerful he was in the Force. That's why even in the thick of battle, you'd often see him subtly guard that area, because he knew it was his one true point of vulnerability. 3rd belt power core. And just when you think Vader's survival all hinged on that life support chest panel, nope, he had a backup. The belt power core was Vader's insurance policy. If the chest panel failed, whether from battle damage or sabotage, this unit could temporarily take over critical systems like oxygen regulation, suit mobility, and internal temperature control. It wasn't as efficient or as powerful as the main system, but in the middle of a fight, it could buy him the precious seconds or minutes he needed to finish an enemy or escape. The belt was also wired into the same nervous system interface as the rest of the suit, meaning if it was damaged, Vader felt it directly. A strike to the belt wasn't just dangerous, it was blindingly painful. But the real strategic brilliance, its placement. Positioned at Vader's waist, it was always with this peripheral vision. He could keep track of its status lights without breaking focus in combat. If power levels dropped or systems switched to backup mode, he'd know instantly. Of course, this meant one thing: if a skilled opponent ever figured out the belt's true purpose, targeting it could be a death sentence for Vader. Which is exactly why its real function was never public knowledge. So while most people saw Vader's belt as just part of his intimidating look, in reality it was the last line between life and death for one of the galaxy's most feared Sith Lords. 2nd, feeding and waste systems. This next part is where it gets seriously grim. Vader could eat the old-fashioned way, but only inside his hyperbaric chamber, and even then, every swallow burned because his throat was so badly scarred. Most of the time, he avoided eating altogether, instead using intravenous feeding tubes that pumped nutrients straight into his body. And just like any living being, what goes in has to come out. His suit handled waste management with built-in catheters and recycling systems. The medical droids had to clean and maintain them regularly because one infection could spread fast in a body already so damaged. It was efficient, sure, but it also meant Vader's daily life was monitored, maintained, and controlled by machines. No privacy, no comfort. First, Sidious design choices, pain as a weapon. And here's where everything makes perfect, terrible sense. When Emperor Sidious had the suit built, he didn't use the most advanced tech in the galaxy. He could have made it lighter, more comfortable, and easier to wear, but he didn't want that. He chose outdated, restrictive systems to keep Vader in constant pain. That agony kept him fueled by the dark side, feeding anger, drowning out hope, and making sure he never forgot his failure on Mustafar. Vader himself could have upgraded it over the years, but he didn't. He preferred the constant pain over risking moments of comfort where his mind might drift to Padme. Or to regret. And this wasn't just armor, it was feeding, and Vader chose to stay in it. Every piece of Darth Vader's armor was more than just machinery. It was a prison of agony, forged to make him stronger in the dark side. His suffering wasn't a flaw, it was the point. And it's what made him the most feared Sith Lord in history.